What I love about Anchor is that it's given me creative control of my own material. I was approached by a big company to do a podcast about the art world, and I didn't want to sign over all rights to them. Anchor has allowed me to make this podcast and to keep creative control as well as financial control in terms of advertising. Anchor gives you everything you need in one place for free. You can use it on your phone or your computer. There are tools that help you to upload your recordings that you've done separately or on the app. They'll distribute it for you as well, which again, I couldn't wrap my mind around distribution, and they have it all there for you in one place: Spotify, Apple Podcast, Google Podcast, and many more. You can easily make money from it as well. They help you advertise. As you can see right now, I'm getting my first ad out through Anchor. And all you have to do is download the app or go to anchor.fm to get started. Good luck with your podcast and getting your voice out there and owning your content. Hi, today I'm at Space Gallery in Soho with Lucio Salvatore, who's in town for his solo exhibition. And we're going to speak to him a little while about his ideas, about his work, about his ideas in general, and about his time working in the studio in Italy and in Brazil, and about his past time in New York. I hope you enjoy this. Thank you. Yeah, you used to live in New York?
I used to come, and I lived here 1 year only once. I tried to escape the cold. New York is very tough on me.
Exactly.
But I came back after a few years now with this. I said to Natalie, the director of the gallery, that it's a soft comeback. Like I came back like the other week, literally. It didn't work. And I wanted to stay a little bit longer to get more the feeling of the city after the preparation, the installation is
for the
done.
Current exhibition.
Yes, for the current exhibition. And I'm very excited to be back.
So let's walk through the space, and you can tell me how you came up with the concept, this black square. I mean, I know I read something about Malevich and stuff like that.
Yes, definitely.
But for example, you were explaining about this photograph here. Even with the photography, you were saying.
So you said Malevich. So in 2015, it was the 100th anniversary of the Black Square that he painted in 1915. I was in Brazil, in Rio de Janeiro, where as an artist I grew up. Like, it was exactly in the art school, Parque Lage, doing an exhibition. And for this anniversary, I thought of celebrating it my way. In Brazil is a country associated with the tropics, with the Amazon, with nature, with color. But when it comes to art, it's a place where, even Rio de Janeiro, it's a place where the concrete movement, all contemporary art started with Mondrian, with Malevich. That's what Cildo Meirelles, like one of my biggest inspiration in art, in Brazilian art, said. And so all these, starting even Elio Tisica with the Neo Concrete Movement, Ligia Clark, they all started with geometry, with abstractions. So I said to me, I want to make my contribution to this art history. So it was a work that literally started with like a thread in the art history, and I did it my way, putting together different elements, like I do in most of my projects. Like this artwork places itself at the margins between painting, sculpture, performance, appropriation. they're very simple when you look at them, but the process is in a place that is difficult to classify. And this is very important to me. So what I did is, like, I was doing a work in a quarry in Italy. So it's very far from Brazil.
Which is part of your heritage.
Exactly. This is like one of my roots.
Yes.
I grew up there. And there I developed this deep connection with nature, with land. I grew up in the countryside, not in the city.
Where is the quarry?
It's between Rome and Naples. And what I did, the quarry, to me, at that time, was a clear symbol of this Stone Age that never ended. Like something very ancestral, which of like an age of an era that we think is gone, but never left us. And it's a symbol of human attitude toward nature and land, like we excavate in a quarry. And stone can be seen as a metaphor of any other natural resource.
Yes.
So what I did is like looking at this process of continuous excavation. Now it's industrialized. It's not much different from 10,000 years ago. So there's this industrial process which transform something which is very our expectation when we think about a stone is of a material that lasts forever, and it actually took hundreds, thousands of years to make it.
Yeah.
And but at the same time, you see it like this destruction, like this pulverization of stone. It happens in moments, instants.
Like with explosives or stuff like that.
Not really with machinery.
With machinery.
It can be done with explosive, but in this case, it's done with machineries, like it's industrial.
And what's the stone?
So we get there.
Okay.
Sorry if I'm.
No, it's okay. Go ahead. I just wanted to
it's
check.
as I told you, there's the whole story behind it.
Yeah.
So when I saw this process, I said, I want to capture the form of the stone wall before it gets excavated. So something that is permanent is being destroyed, but there's going to be a memory of that place, of that moment. And I literally put a canvas on the stone wall, and I rubbed it, and I get this physical transposition of the stone on the canvas. And it's really meaningful to me, like this inversion of values, like when the stone, which is perceived as to be permanent, disappears, and something like a very tiny canvas, which is unprimed, and a very simple gesture with acrylic, has this permanent sign that will stay forever. To me, it tells a lot about art itself, how it started. So it was the first, the part of the series, which I was doing before 2015. When I got this, this insight, this intuition about like thinking about Malevich, about Brazilian heritage, about art heritage, about abstraction of form. So there's a new element, not the physical memory, but the metaphysical memory of some abstract form, like a black square that was supposed to be, as Malevich intended, like the 0 point of form. And I wanted to break that 0 point of form and make it something with different meaning. So what I did is I painted a black a black square on the stone wall, like more or less the size of Malevich, like 19 centimeter.
Yeah.
And then I excavated the black square with this machinery, with this industrial process. So it's like an appropriation of an industrial process. And all the fragments of this black square are stitched on the canvas. They carry the form of the stone wall before it gets excavated.
Okay. Now
so you see here, every stone has a little mark, black mark, which is fragment. So you have a concrete fragment of a metaphysical ideal form.
Right.
It's like of a platonic work, I would say.
And you sewed it onto the canvas yourself.
Yes, and this is part of interesting also the contradiction between like the industrial process of destruction and like manual, slow process of reconstruction, of stitching it on the canvas.
Yeah. Well, tell me, because we mentioned these things briefly, over here you have some stone as well, but it seems like there's a print on the stone, or is this the natural? What is this piece about here?
So here, if I had to label, which I don't like this work as, this series of work as conceptual, is because they literally question or meditate on the object of art itself. So as you see, I mean, these were like complex in the way I created them, but also the photographs, there's like, I like the idea of representing something on top of the object that is represented.
Oh, okay.
So this circularity.
Yeah.
You see it very strongly in this one, because I photographed these images in 2005 and 2006. I never shown them before because I never quite found the right way of printing, and I didn't like the reflections of the photographs. I didn't like the cotton paper like fine art and like for this work until recently when I developed this technique where I could print this image of this dust that you see, this dust on top of these stones that is printed on top of gesso that's mixed with that dust. So you have like still the representation of something on top of the object that is represented.
Yeah.
So this dust and of the marble stones in this case. And I liked it because it also gives you the sense of an object, the texture.
Yes.
So I'm very happy because it's something that comes from the past.
Yeah.
And you never end up dealing with your past.
Right. So I had a few questions. I don't know if
I read them this morning. I wrote like quickly, like
but
the
you
most.
You don't have to.
I was. Believe me. I was. Yesterday was an intense day. I wanted to like sit and think of the question and say, like try to embody them, like because also of the language barrier. I just came back to New York. For me, it's like I'm used to tell about these works in English, in Portuguese, in Italian. Not in English. It was my first time of this particular series. So I wrote down everything, but it's it was a good opportunity of meditating on my own work.
Yes. So I mean, a lot of this you already discussed in the introduction that we went through about the works, but how do you reconcile that with creating something that lasts for the future? You already answered that.
Yeah, because of the inversion.
Oh yeah, you talked about sustainability as well.
Yeah, I mean, I answered to this like we talked.
Yeah, we talked about all of it.
But if you want to go deeper in each one of them, I
wouldn't mind asking about how the work has evolved, because for me this is the first introduction to your work. But can you tell us a little bit about when you first started and how the ideas developed from the beginning of your work as an artist up till now?
Yeah.
I'm going to grab the thing. But tell me, I'm listening.
Oh, okay.
We can pause it as well and then come back.
No, I didn't know you were.
Okay. I'm only going.
So, my work goes in waves.
Yeah.
So, I go from more political work. Sometimes it's more conceptual. So it really stays in the boundaries of a genre. It doesn't happen a lot.
Yeah.
But sometimes a little bit more personal. So there's no like rule.
There's no rule. So when did you start doing?
But one thing that's important is like, and this I think it comes from my Italian heritage, like to go deep into the questions. It's all about like asking questions. I certainly don't find the answers in the artworks.
Yes.
But I find better questions.
Right.
And deeper questions. So this is what's important to me, is like your personal journey, and to be able to grow, to learn. That's why it's also important. Travel is necessary.
Yeah.
So I have like my heritage, but has always comes with the narratives.
Right.
They are deeply rooted in you, in yourself, and sometimes imposed in yourself.
Right.
So you change, you go to South America. I traveled a lot before ending up in Rio de Janeiro.
Right.
But you go to South America and you have some antidotes to those narratives. And this is and that's fundamental to me, because we all go through struggle, to solitude, and I see art as a way of being together with the other.
Yeah.
So you find a way of reaching out the other, and you try to do it. Sometimes you succeed, sometimes you don't, and you feel a little more lonely. But
do you have a group of artists you work with in South America or in Italy? I mean, do you have like a support network where you bounce ideas off each other? I'm not sure.
It's interesting, this question. It's actually very complicated for me, because I have definitely mixed feeling. This moving around from Italy and South America, New York, Asia sometimes, but it puts in a place of thinking, questioning a lot the narratives, which is a good thing when it comes to these deeper questions. But when it comes to associating yourself to groups, it's a big problem. So it's a big problem because I see that there are main narratives, there are counter narratives, they're like the conservative narratives, the post-colonial narratives, and they all end up in certain dogmas, which to me are very clear. I live them on my skin, and they create a distance.
Yes,
there's always an internal distance, and this me being like always a stranger.
Well, that's interesting because, people talk about multiculturalism and the ability to mix cultures and stuff like that, but very few people actually address the loneliness that comes when you are in another culture. And
exactly.
It's true.
I always think, Brazil is I give Brazil, but I could talk about Italy, I could talk about United States. We are probably in very similar situation. I think that Brazil is a very political, difficult situation. There's a president which is he's a nightmare, believe me. I mean, of course, cannot do the damages that Mr. Trump can, but still, he can do damages to a lot to the Brazilian population. And so there's a terrible, terrible, tragic narrative. But there's also a counter narrative that's supposed to see the other, like I'm talking about intellectuals, I'm talking about artists, but they simply cannot see anything other than their superiority to the other.
Right.
And this brought a lot of people, because we can't confuse like governments, politicians, and very conservative people, which like whatever, with like people that work, they are decent people, honest people, that sometimes fall into these narratives. So it's very important for me to understand the other, which means in this case, if you're like a Brazilian intellectual, to try to understand people that vote for the president.
Yeah,
Why
yeah,
are they
yeah,
voting
yeah,
for the
yeah,
president?
yeah.
And I think this is like very important to progressive like politics, and which we lost that. So we tend to focus on ourselves, on our mirror, and when it comes to art, I think this is very strong, and this is one of the battles I think I do for my life. I don't see it happening a lot in the art world.
Yes.
But like try to not to focus on the idea of beauty of art that you have. Try to go a little bit beyond that idea. Like the idea is always a narrative, like an image you project of beauty. What do you think is beauty? And what we think of ourselves. So it's different who we are than what we tell ourselves we are. So I think that art to me plays that role. I try to understand the story that I tell about myself and myself. So which are two very different things.
Do you ever think you might work in the future with the stone in terms of sculpture, not necessarily using it to reflect on another object, but in and of itself as the stone? I don't know. Does it ever talk to you like that?
I worked already. I'm working actually in the studio with marble. I moved back my studio to Italy.
What part of Italy?
3 years, south of Italy. I'm always from the south. This is interesting.
But what part? Otranto?
Between Rome and Naples.
Between Rome and Naples, right? Like where the quarry is.
You know what? There was one of these. I didn't say in Brazil it's edital, like where you apply for a project, and it was only for people from the south.
Okay, that's so. Cool.
Well, that was not really cool to me because what they consider south is what I don't consider south. So I mean, there's always a south in every place you go. So for example, in Brazil, Europe is the north, is white, is male. It's pretty, what can I say, superficial and also like very intellectual, but like very far from reality.
Right.
A vision of Europe of like this, also the vision that people like the American conservative have of America, like of this marble, like a stone built on Northern Europe traditions. That's not the United States.
But
it's
now
never
you're
been
working on something.
So what I was saying is like I'm working on marble. I came back to Italy, and but it's I wouldn't consider it like sculpture. Like as you see, there's always like at the margins, or like these joints. I'm doing actually this work on like engraving veins on marble that has their own vein, and I'm getting marbles from different parts of the world. So I started with marble from Afghanistan, which really meant a lot because to me I was walking this quarry that's selling marbles from Africa, from Namibia, from Brazil, from Italy, and then I see this beautiful piece of white marble and say, where is this from? I say, this is from Afghanistan. That was a few years ago, and there was war in Afghanistan. I said, wow, these stones come from territory of war. People probably from Afghanistan can never come to Europe. I mean, they haven't known the conditions, they have the papers, but these stones is here. And I start to think about that, and that was really. So I'm working on that. It's one of the projects that I'm doing. I mean, I always work on several.
Right, at the same time.
At the same time on several projects, and then according to the opportunities, I show one or the other. This work was done in 2014, 2015. I've shown them some of these pieces, and not this one, but of the same project in the Museum of Modern Art in Rio de Janeiro, which was one of the most meaningful exhibitions to me.
That's cool.
With amazing curators. But showing them now in New York for the first time. I wasn't planning that. The gallery chose it, as the gallery from Rio de Janeiro chose it. And I'm happy because I like to show in galleries works that are meditation on the objects of art. I don't show work that have like a different conceptual and or spiritual aim like installation work. They don't have to deal with the object of art, because then you're selling something which was not supposed to be sold. Like that's an object. There's something which connects you with the idea of having like something concrete, like an object of art.
Well, I really like the fact that in your conversation, ideas play a big part, and you speak a lot about ideas. What's your idea of the ideal collector? Like, who would be your ideal person to buy and hang your art in their home or wherever they have a collection privately?
Well, I would say I don't like
Go ahead.
to think of ideal, generally speaking. So if I have to think of a concrete collector, I would say that superficially, the one who loves my art, so he must love it, has to have a deep connection with the art. But I would say more in depth, if I have to be more, you use this word, exigent? Something like
demanding.
Demanding,
yeah.
exactly. You speak Italian. A little bit
of something, yes.
Yes, demanding. If I had to be more demanding, is someone that has a connection with art that is similar to what I was saying. As an artist, to ask deeper questions, to try to transcend the image that you create about yourself, and someone that doesn't quite just stay on the surface, on the shiny surface of things.
Yes.
I was in a restaurant the other night with American friends, and there was this huge sculpture of this horse, like all shiny, and I was not understanding the sculpture, but the guys next to me were loving
so
it.
Great.
They were loving it. I was wondering if that's a coon.
I was just about to say that.
And I was saying
I
I was looking at it and I still am not getting what it is about.
Yeah. Well, look at our president, and all of his buildings are shiny. They're all gold and shiny.
When Maurizio Catalan showed the toilet in the Guggenheim.
I love that piece.
I love that, but to me it was like, because I was celebrating the idea of the genius of doing something like that. And I was like, well, I didn't see it like a big idea. I didn't see the genius, because I see it all the time. I saw it in the picture of the president, so it was already there. So I thought it was more of an appropriation of like maybe Trump's toilet. So it was for me it was very clear, but not just for the Trump. Let's not forget that this kind of culture is old. I mean, it's much before Trump.
It's true.
So it's about a certain consumerism, a certain opulence that actually has some roots also that I think today are not very much acknowledged. And I have to be acknowledging when I say not just from the, let's say, conservative, opulent America, but also from the counterculture.
Yes.
Because see, thank God, you see emancipation of a whole society, group of people, ethnic groups, Latinos. I'm a Latino. I consider myself a Latino because I come from Lazio in Italy. Like in the States, but at the same time, all this richness comes from a position, and all this emancipation. Also, when it comes to certain rights, if you see the people that bring this activism, I'm thinking about artists, music people, like athletes, they live in a huge opulence. It comes from a system that is built on military power.
Yes.
So that's
the same destruction that we're talking about in the quarries, or that happens in Afghanistan, or that happens in the forests in Brazil.
These opulence come from somewhere.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think we are pretty much done for now. I mean, we could talk forever, but we don't have forever. And I know your opening is tonight, and you're very excited, and you have a lot to do before that.
It's a pleasure for me to be here. Yeah. I told you it's my first podcast.
Yes, great. So there'll be much more to come, I'm sure. Well, good luck tonight, and good luck with the time in New York and with the exhibition. Okay.